and welcome back to Strength and Conditioning, the bottom line. I'm Mike Dorsey, and I'm here with 20-year veteran NBA strength and conditioning coach, Rich Williams. What's going on, brother?
What's going on, man? Just another day in paradise.
I dig it, man. And, we say paradise, but you're helping athletes and organizations get to that paradise in an injury-free fashion, correct?
Without a doubt. That's supposed to be my job. So
I love it. And so speaking of that, from a topic perspective today, you mentioned this concept called corrective training, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's dive a little bit into corrective training and how that applies to strength and conditioning, because ultimately we want to get to the bottom line of how corrective training is applied through strength and conditioning to help, organizations, athletes, but then people in general.
Yeah. You know what? This is one of my favorite subjects. This is kind of, when I first came into the league, this wasn't a part of the strength and conditioning world. It was just strength and conditioning and training and performance. And the athletic trainers kind of deal with the injury side of it, But, as I study and involved, I found out that, man, there's so many things that we can do in the weight room that's injury prevention.
Mm-hmm.
So, I started to study and learn, this, I like to call it the sequence. It's the sequence of how you deal with certain muscles and deal with the weaknesses and the tightness of certain muscles. Mm-hmm. So I start to study these sequences. For example, when we talk about corrective training, it always starts with an assessment.
Okay.
Now, what's great about an assessment and what I love about it is that you can go to high tech or you can go to simple as possible. But both of them are going to give you a great baseline of where you may see potential problems in the athlete. So I'm going to give you a perfect example. We're going to use a simple assessment of an overhead squat, right? Okay. So what I mean by overhead squat, I have the guy basically bring his arms up in there and just do a squat. I have his shoes off. I have his shorts rolled up so I can see his knees, and I have him do a squat. Now, within that squat, I can see a ton of things, right? I always start with the feet, looking at what the feet are doing, right? The feet, we're going to keep it simple. If the feet are pronating too much, that causes a lot of problems down the connected chain that I have to address, right? Whatever happens at the feet is going to work up towards the body. For example, you would be surprised, a person that's an overpronator, right? Your feet are here, tucked in, how it affects the shoulder.
Wow.
I know people who have shoulder problems that's related to the foot.
Wow. Hold on, pause. You now are connecting the dots. And again, this is strength and conditioning, the bottom line. So we really want to get down to the root of how strength and conditioning can help to impact things on a lot of different levels, but then getting to the basis of it. And you gave a very good example of how issues with your feet can impact your shoulder. And I think, but our natural tendency is to go directly to the source or go directly to where the problem is.
Bingo.
Versus reverse engineering it and thinking, how does this all connect? And maybe the problem is not your shoulder, but it's really your feet being pronated.
Exactly. You said it perfectly. Back in the day, when somebody had a shoulder problem, what did we do? Oh, we got to do a lot of shoulder exercise, but we never looked at the problem. What's causing that problem? It's never, remember this, Mike, it's never, I always say to the rule, it's never the knee's fault, right? If your knee is hurt, it's never the knee's fault. It's the things that's associated around the knee. If my foot overpronates, something very simple, my knee has to follow my foot, right? So if my foot overpronates, my knee caves in, we call it valgus. And if you stand valgus too long, you put more pressure on the tendon. So let me ask you this question.
Okay.
Whose fault is it that the tendon is bothering the knee?
Wow. It's not the knee. It's the fact that you pronated, which is putting more pressure. Wow. So
that's a simple assessment, right?
That's
just
interesting.
Looking at what the feet does.
That's so
take a lot of money.
But it doesn't take any money at all.
Don't take any money at all.
Awareness and knowledge, right?
Exactly.
Awareness and knowledge. So if you're aware that the body is interconnected, so that goes to me, that leads to training, right? And so, yes, just because you're in good shape and you go to the gym, you might know some exercises, but are you doing those exercises properly? And do you know how those exercises impact other parts of your body, not just the target muscle group that you're working on?
Exactly.
That comes through training, through education, through experience, but then also through you just kind of going through and understanding and how to put this stuff together. And so the knowledge is cool, but wisdom is being able to apply that knowledge.
Exactly.
And that's what you're talking about here, is having wisdom of connecting the dots of the knowledge and how to apply it.
Exactly. So, we always talk about, how do you make an impact of the bottom line? So if I want to make an impact on anyone and start something to teach people, that's the one thing you cannot ever get over: teaching the science of the body, teaching the science of human movement. If you can master that, you're going to be a great strength coach.
Wow.
So let me ask you a question. What's more valuable, that I teach them the fundamentals of functional movement and how to look at the body and how it intertwines with each other, or just go and give them basic Instagram type exercises?
Woo! You know what, dude? I'm gonna tell you what's interesting there. It's like, when you talk to guys who just go to the gym, I just want to get big. I just want to get my bench press up. Okay, that's cool. But let's think back to these different things and how your back and your shoulders and your chest and all these things are intertwined. But then, are there any other underlying conditions which might restrict your movement, which you getting a bigger chest might actually pull on something else, which might cause another issue? Exactly. But again, that's the awareness of the knowledge and understanding how the body fully intertwines and works together. So when I think about strength and conditioning, the bottom line as it pertains to corrective training, when you're speaking to the providers or you're speaking to the coaches or the trainers, it's probably in their best interest to first do a deep dive and understand the different components and mechanisms of the body and how they're all interrelated before even moving into some type of corrective training program, correct?
Exactly, of course. That's where the learning, to me, that's where the fun comes in, right? That's where the fun comes in. Man, Mike, I've been in this game for 21 years. And I can still say I still haven't even come close to understanding the body.
Wow.
So you can't go anywhere until you understand the functionality of the body. You can't go. That's corrective training, right? The best trainers I know, and some good ones out there, the one thing they have in common is they understand how the body moves. If you don't understand how the body moves, how are you going to see that abnormal movement?
Oh, hold on, pause. I think that's extremely important. You don't know what's wrong if you don't know what's supposed to be right.
Exactly. So when you look at that foot and you like, all right, well, what is it doing? Right? Is it subnating? Is it pronating? Is it pronating too much? Because we go into pronation. Pronation is our ability. That's where we get our shock absorption from. The foot gets soft, it pronates. But if it doesn't come out of it, shock absorption is lost. So that shock absorption is lost. The pressure that goes up from the shock absorption is lost, which goes to the joints. That's how the body protects itself. That's how it protects itself by using pronation as a shock absorption. But some people stay in it too long. But if you don't know that, when you look at that foot, you won't see the problem.
I have a question. So what if you're someone that, okay, let's say you're someone who's born with flat feet, right? And you have and Black people, a lot of us have flat feet or flatter feet. Right. Yep. And so therefore we by naturally tend to be a little more pronated because our feet are flat. But it was funny, I was listening to a doctor saying how there are exercises you can do to almost create arches at times or correct some of that pronation. Someone who has a natural setup like that,
there we go.
Is there a way to do corrective training to get out of that?
All right, this is what I love. We've had this conversation amongst strength coaches 100 times. No answer to it. But these are the questions that I bring up. I don't know if I can give you an answer to that, but I can give you some questions of awareness. Why? Right? Every great athlete that I've ever assessed over the years, one thing they had in common, most of them are they're flat-footed. They're pronators. So do you label that a dysfunction? Why are all the great athletes flat-footed? That's not a dysfunction to me, right? So I have to kind of go back and we say pronation, boom, flat-footed. My thing, and this is what I want to study, is the difference between an injured athlete with flat foot and an athlete that's not injured with flat feet. And see what the difference in mechanics are in those two athletes.
Okay.
Because that's a really interesting question. And I've had this question in debate with so many different strength coaches. And I asked myself the same thing. I said, man, why are all these athletes flat-footed?
Can I tell you what one of the things, hold on one second. One of the things that's interesting, I was actually speaking to my aunt who is a podiatrist, right? And one of the things she was saying was most sprinters are flat-footed. To your point, most explosive athletes are flat-footed. But she was saying something about either the ligament tightening or something makes it more fast twitch. Or she was saying something, I don't remember exactly what she said, but there was some type of scientific response to why typically the faster people either are flat-footed or have very lower arches, in their foot. So there is something to it.
There's something to it, but the question that we're asking ourselves, because I know what she's saying, it's a springboard. They have a great springboard in the foot. Whether it's flat or not, they still have this ability to boom, boom, boom. But the question is, if we're talking about corrective training, are they at risk to being more injury prone? And that's what we're talking about.
And, and again, we're not just talking about the sport itself, because again, the bottom line is not just your sporting life, but life after sport. So what about later in life? Do individuals that are pronated, that have flat feet or very low arches, do they have, foot issues later on? Are they ones that have to wear orthotics? Are they the ones that deal with foot pain and spurs and all these different things on their feet later in life due to being pronated, flat-footed? And could your corrective training while they're athletes actually help them later in life when they're 50, 60, 70 years old?
And that's a good point. But the question is, what kind of corrective training should they be doing?
Yes.
If they naturally have this springboard, is it benefit to put them in orthotics that take away that? Will that change the mechanics of how they built? Because you got to think, from the moment you're born, your body is molding itself to be what it is. If you change that, you change the mechanics of how your body wants to be. We all built different, correctly? And we build ourselves to mold ourselves to be the athlete or the person we're going to be. So you have to be careful when you say, okay, I want to change that. Well, that's not exactly how it might work for that person. You might want to train them according to how they function.
That's so look, and this is so interesting because, last time when we were talking about sports science, we really got into the nuances of it's really all about communication, asking the questions, assessing, and all of that. When it comes to corrective training, you can develop a program, but it really comes down to you really understanding the body. But now you're even adding another component or another level to that. It's about knowing the body of that specific athlete that you're working with.
Exactly.
Because their normal might not be the normal of somebody else. And so you trying to make them normal, and I'm using air quotes when I say normal, might not necessarily be a benefit. You actually might be hurting them.
Exactly.
Because a lot of metrics are based on just average numbers, right? And I was listening to something and it was talking about like cholesterol numbers, and it said, and don't quote me, but it said something to the effect that like half of heart attacks occur in people with normal cholesterol levels, right? And so it's just like, okay, so then do we need to have a cholesterol under a certain amount, or is that just average? but your normal cholesterol average might be higher, and you're not unhealthy. That's just your normal. I mean, it's just, it's all about the specific.
But that's a great question. That's why when people do measurements of ankle dorsiflexion, right? How much range you got in your ankles. It's going to be different for everyone. Typically, most basketball players have tight ankles. Most of them have limited ankle dorsiflexion. That's why if you measure it in function is going to tell you how it connects the kinetic chain. So that's going to tell you if you need to address that or not.
Ooh, function. So fellas, ladies, guys, organizations, professional athletes, amateur athletes, function. Function is extremely important. Understanding the body, understanding the individual bodies that you're working with there, but then also assessing function.
There you go. That
is extremely important.
At the end of the day, Mike, you have to assess function, because if you assess an athlete in posture, meaning just, for example, standing, have someone sit on the table and assess their ankle dorsiflexion, that's only going to tell you part of the story. You want to know how that limitation affects that kinetic chain. That's going back to our athletes that are flat-footed. If that flat-footed doesn't affect the kinetic chain in a way that's abnormal, then I don't believe you need to correct that. I believe that's the way they function.
Abnormal for that individual athlete.
But it's abnormal for anything, because at some point, whether they're flat-footed or not, if that flat-footed is causing the need to go in too much valgus, that's an issue. Valgus shuts off the glutes upstairs. Shutting the glutes off upstairs causes you to dip in the hip, causes the lumbar spine to be crooked. Now you're looking at all kind of problems.
Wow.
Man, that's a universal thing, right? That's a universal thing.
That is so fascinating. And you're talking about this through the lens of working with athletes in the NBA and professional basketball players. I'm thinking back to the story of like Usain Bolt, how he talked about growing up, he had like scoliosis, right? And so he had a curvature of the spine, but he started working with different trainers and individuals to, in essence, compensate for that curvature of the spine, which once he unlocked that was part of the reason for him to really unlock the speed. Exactly. But again, it's all these connections but it was specific to him, not necessarily general mechanism.
But they looked at certain things that they made it so that could be an issue, a tightness here, a tightness there. Oh, we don't want to worry about that, and they corrected it. But what they did, like you said, Mike, they individualized it to him. And that's what, to me, when we talk about corrective training, forget corrective training, we're talking about being a great strength coach. That's studying. That's what you want to master. When you want to be this functional type training strength coaches, which that's the thing now, you got to master that. If you can't master that, it's hard to go for it's hard to understand how to correct something if you can't master that.
And then so when we think about, and again, we think about strength and conditioning, the bottom line, corrective training is really about mastering the science of the body, but then also mastering the science of the individual body that you're actually working with, and making sure that you focus on function at that particular point. And once you get to that point, you can then curate a plan, a program that's going to work on optimizing the functionality of that particular athlete. And I think this also lends itself to the notion of the importance of personalizing your programs versus, like you mentioned earlier, going to Instagram or Facebook and getting the generic, how do you increase your vertical by 6 inches, once these 12 steps. Yeah, they might be beneficial, but they might not be tailored to you based off of how your body mechanics work.
Exactly. And when you're talking about like those kind of things, like those exercises are great. When I see them, I love them. But my question is, where do they fit with that individual? Where do they fit in your program? What part of the program do they fit in? That's the questions you got to ask yourself when you're investigating what exercises are best for me. It's never a wrong exercise. It's just how you apply that exercise that's wrong, right? All exercises are great. It's how you apply it. The people who don't know how to apply it make that exercise wrong.
That's real. That's real. So I guess as we kind of finish up this conversation and talking about corrective training, what would you say to organizations who maybe have not fully invested in strength and conditioning coach on a personalized level for each one of their athletes? What would you say to them would be kind of like some inspiration or insight that they probably need to go a little more into the personalized route of helping to get the most out of the athletes within their organization?
I think I will always tell them individualize. Like when we think about all the assessments that we do, no matter what, where our goal is always to individualize to that individual. It goes across the board to the individual. Skills work to the individual, weight room work to the individual, training room work. Gotta individualize. And I know it's tough because in team sports, to individualize for every guy is tough, but to keep them injury free, I believe it's no other way, Mike. It's no other way.
And that's the bottom line, man. And when we think about it, there are things that you need to invest and put emphasis on. And there are things that you maybe can get away with letting slide. According to 20+ year NBA veteran strength and conditioning coach, avoiding personalized training, personalized strength and conditioning, personalized corrective training for your athletes is basically a scenario that's probably not going to pay out in the long run, because every individual, even though they're on a team, is built and wired differently. So you have to account for that.
Exactly.
It's funny. I know we're talking basketball here. I always, when I think about coaching, I do personal development coaching and all. I always think about the construction of Dream Team 2. Like, to me, Dream Team 2 was like the best dream team of all of them, right?
Yeah.
From basketball perspective. And one of the things that was interesting about Dream Team 2 was it was a great team, but it was also the greatest collection of individual basketball athletes that have ever been put together at one time.
Yeah.
So you had amazing Hall of Fame individuals all coming together to work as a team. And if you put through the lens of that strength and conditioning and the bottom line of personalizing the strength and conditioning to the individual components on your team, that's when you open up the possibility of creating your own dream team, because each individual component of the team is at its max potential.
Exactly. And that's what's great about the going basketball. To me, that's what the great GMs do, right? They can study every individual piece and be able to put those pieces where they belong to make the whole thing work.
Yes.
Great strength coaches do the same thing. We analyze every individual piece to make it all come together to make this great athlete.
Ooh, come on, man. Come on, man.
And you got to master that. And I can honestly say I haven't mastered it yet, but man, I'm working my ass off to try to master that.
Oh, you're going to get there, man. You're going to get, and look, and check, the funny thing is, by you always recognizing that you've not mastered it, always keeps you in a state of improvement.
Have to. You have to. Mike, I do that every single day. Every day I say, dang, I got to learn that. I haven't mastered that yet. God, I got to learn it. I do it every day.
So for everybody listening to this, someone who feels like they don't have it all together, they don't know it all yet, is someone who's been in the NBA for 21 years, working with the greatest athletes in the world at the highest levels on stages that people could only dream and imagine. He still wakes up every day thinking that there's something for him to learn. If you think about strength and conditioning, the bottom line, if you're jumping into this industry, if you're pursuing this industry, always make sure that you have that mindset in play, so that you always keep yourself in a state of perpetual improvement, so that you become your best, but you also help the athletes, the organizations, and the societies that you benefit, you help them to become their best as well.
Love it, man. Couldn't say anything better.
That's what's up. Well, hey, until next time, this is Mike Dorsey and my man Rich Williams, 21-year NBA veteran strength and conditioning coach, and this is Strength and Conditioning, the bottom line.